Anyway, tranquility is what we're talking about right now because we are on a quest. We are going to try to find the most tranquil place in Ireland, and we need your help. Now, tranquility is a subjective term. A tranquil place is somewhere that is peaceful, restful and soothing rather than somewhere that enjoys a complete absence of sound. Dictionaries differ in how they define tranquility, but I particularly like this one from Merriam-Webster. Tranquil. It says, free from agitation of mind or spirit. Now, given the nature of this programme, Mooney Goes Wild, and calling on all of my knowledge of our various contributors, I imagine tranquility would be measured by how far removed they are from human interference, how surrounded they are by pure natural sound, would be their thing, flowing water, a light breeze, the dawn chorus maybe. Now, I find that very tranquil, I have to admit. Recorded at Tuscany Marsh Nature Reserve in Cove last May. It's part of our live broadcast. So you can see tranquility is subjective, but nonetheless, we are embarking on this quest, and apart from needing your assistance, we've enlisted some professional help too. Dermot Keeney runs a company called ICAN Acoustics, I-C-A-N, Acoustics, and he's an expert in noise control. Dermot is in our Galway studio today. Dermot, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Derek.
Thanks for helping us out. Now, sound is one of several criteria we will be considering in our search for the most tranquil spot in Ireland, but it's probably the most crucial. So tell us a little bit about your work, particularly in assessing what you might call noise pollution.
Okay, Derek. Well, basically, if you have a situation where there's a particular noise problem, we would go out and measure the noise and quantify it, and perhaps make recommendations on how we might reduce the noise and that type of thing.
And how do you do it? What do you do?
Well, first step is to basically to measure it, to establish what the exact level is, and then we might recommend, if it's industrial noise, we might recommend that they would install silencing. They may install. There's various methods of reducing the noise as such.
But how do you measure it?
We measure it with an instrument called a sound level meter, a decibel meter basically, and we quantify that and establish a sort of a mathematical measurement in terms of using a dB scale.
And can I ask your background?
Yeah, I studied applied acoustics, masters in applied acoustics in the UK university, Derby University, and really it came from, I suppose, having a love for sound and music and noise. I originally studied engineering, but this was a sort of a logical follow-on for me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the importance of hearing, because we need to hear some sounds for communication and indeed going back far enough, and even today, for survival.
You're absolutely right, Derek. I suppose at a very basic level, yes, as you said, we need them for communication. I suppose listening is an essential part of our communication. Our hearing, though, it's vital as a protection mechanism, and people often underestimate that. It goes back, even if you go back to the times of a caveman, for example, it was essential that a caveman could hear a tiger quietly approaching.
The saber-toothed tiger come and bite you on the bottom.
Exactly, that's it, exactly. And the importance there was that you were able to hear that. So our hearing, it never, it's always active, even when we're sleeping. For example, we're sleeping in our beds at night. We're listening out for smoke alarms, perhaps a child crying at night, and hopefully not an intruder. But there's various. It's a protection mechanism that's always on, even when we sleep. So it is vital.
Tranquility is a very special word. It was the first word back from the moon, and the words were, "Tranquility base here, the eagle has landed." So that is an extraordinary privilege. Of all the words in all the languages, tranquility is the one that made it back. And of course, search for tranquility. I hear a lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, and that is the ultimate tranquil line. I think it's very special, tranquility. And of course, it's always attracted us, the old desert monks, fathers, St. Anthony in the desert out. Of course, the Temptations really made St. Anthony in the desert, because it gave artists an opportunity to depict him with naked ladies dancing in the distance, the Temptations sort of thing, So I think it's very special, tranquility, and it's very important to have that. But there's another side to it. In some cases, the tranquility is really a sort of ecstasy. If you take the tranquility of people going to very spectacular scenery, it's tranquil in a sense, but it's also moving and uplifting and so forth. So there's a kind of a double-edged sword here. On the one hand, you can seek out peace and tranquility and emptiness of mind, the nirvana of the Buddhists kind of thing. And on the other hand, you can mystical ecstasy at the other extremes, revelations into the nature of being and communication with the absolute and all that sort of thing.
Well,
anyway,
now it is very subjective then in that case, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So this is going to be a hard task for you. I suppose we should probably distinguish between noise, Dermot, and sound.
Yeah, sure, Derek. Well, noise, I suppose, in its, most basic form, it's energy that the ear can detect as such. So you can have noise or sound, as I say, from hi-fis, from instruments, conversation, and so on. But noise, I suppose, by definition, would be unwanted sound. It's sound that we don't want. And I'll give you an example of that. If I take up, we'll say, a teenager's iPod today, for example, and listen to the contents of it, I might describe that as noise or unwanted sound, whereas the teenager may feel very differently about it. So you're absolutely right. It's totally subjective.
And let's talk about then the sounds we might hear in nature. So we've got waves. We hear the sounds of waves. Wind, rain.
Yeah, that's right. Wind, rain, insects in hot climates, for example. We were in France there maybe 2 years ago on our summer holidays. And, the sound of insects alone. So there are natural sounds there that are always there, even in any sort of an environment. But the problem then arises when it comes to artificial sounds. It's the sounds like road traffic noise, air traffic noise. Even if you're in a very rural part of Ireland, for example, I would suggest you would find it difficult to be absolutely free, for example, from, say, an aircraft flying over 30,000 feet. So there's always the potential of noise being there, even in the most rural of environments.
Following on from that, Dermot, you were talking about sound intensity, and we measure sound intensity in decibels. But the different types of noise or sound, because I think a lot of people will interchange the two words. If we're listening to birdsong, it may be very loud and we're listening to it and we enjoy it. We often refer to it as a cacophony of sound. And yet you might listen to something else, like, say, scratching on a board. I think the classic scene from the film Jaws, when I can't remember his name. What was his name?
Roy Scheider.
Roy Scheider. He's scratching along the board.
Oh, no, that was the marine biologist.
No, yes.
Yeah, Cooper.
Cooper, that was it.
Cooper or Hooper?
Hooper, I think it was. And he's scratching on the board. And it really drew people's attention.
Robert Shaw.
Quint.
Sorry, he scratched the board. Excuse me.
So what the point I'm saying is, are there different types of noise?
There are, and obviously with that, different types of noises induce different responses, for example, from people. And one good example I recall hearing at an environmental seminar about 3 years ago at this stage. If you're lying in your bed, for example, in the morning at 6 a.m. in the morning, and suddenly a company will come along and collect your bins, for example, you might hear that noise, and it may disturb you, but there's likely to be a sort of a wider acceptance to that type of noise due to the fact that there's a sort of a common good, and basically your bins are being collected in your area, the area is benefiting from it, and there's almost like a wider acceptance from that type of noise. But if there was undesirable youths, for example, outside your house at the same time, 6 o'clock in the morning, generating similar sort of levels of noise, you mightn't have the same response to that. So noise can bring on different responses, if you like, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And what's the effect of noise on concentration? Different amounts or different levels of noise and concentration. If somebody's trying to study and there's a clock ticking in the background, that may be okay to one person, but to another it just may drive them mad, or a tap that's dripping. And I think there have been a number of studies done in open plan offices as distinct from small enclosed offices. And am I right in saying that they have found that the more noise is present, the greater the number of mistakes that have been made?
Yes, generally you would try to design a space so that that the noise climate is in keeping with that space. For example, in a library, you want it to be sufficiently quiet so that you can concentrate. And like the recommended levels, say of 40 dB, for example, would be recommended for a library. Whereas a bedroom at night, you might want levels as low as 30 dB. So there is standards and guidance there to sort of guide you in terms of I suppose, designing that space so that it suits the requirements of the space.
Looking back at experiences of tranquility, I think, Derek, you and I, when we were in Lapland, we went out on these frozen lakes, and it was so still and so quiet, and the cold air.
The River Thon, I think it's called.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we could hear a dog bark
Jarvin.
5 kilometres away. The sound carried so well there, and it was so acute, the hearing there. And of course birds use that in the early morning, because after all it's very calm in the early morning, the air is cold, and so their songs carry further. And some measurements of elephant calls in Africa show that the elephants trumpet low frequency sounds in the morning in the cool of the air, and it travels better, and they get their message out to other elephants. So tranquility is something very useful and something very practical.
Well, let's talk about what we're looking for, Dermot, okay? Because lots of people are suggesting places they consider the most tranquil in Ireland. By the way, Richard Tim has been on to say that Houston was the first word heard from the moon. He said, Houston, tranquility base here.
Oh.
The eagle has landed. Well done, Tim. I think you're right. Anyway, so Dermot, just explain to people now, what are we looking for? You've come on board, and by the way, thank you very much indeed to you and your company for agreeing to do this. We're trying to find the most tranquil place in Ireland. How scientific will it be? What are we asking people to do?
Okay, basically, Derek, what we, as you said, we're looking for the most tranquil location in Ireland. We've prepared a questionnaire that people can go onto the show onto the site.
Yes,
and,
on our website. Just before about
yeah.
around 4:30 thereabouts, you'll be able to go onto the website and you'll be able to download a questionnaire and fill in the application. But you go ahead, you can explain it.
So we've put together a questionnaire basically where we want people to download it, print it off if you like, and take a trip out and to the environment that you think is the most tranquil location in Ireland. And just we're going to get people to maybe carry out their own subjective survey. We want them to go out on a day, for example, or and as well as a day and a night, where the winds are that bit lower, when there's no rain, for example, and just make a few notes about what you actually hear. Are you hearing waves? Are you hearing streams? Are you hearing, rustling trees? And also to make comment on any artificial noise you hear, for example, traffic noise, aircraft noise. Now, we would be hoping that people would identify some of the quietest areas in the country, and basically when we'll take those back in and analyse them and try and establish if it is the quietest place in the country, and then we'll go there and measure it.
Now, have you ever done anything like this before?
Yeah, we would do background noise studies all the time. If for example, if somebody was considering putting an industry in a rural location, for example, we would go out and do a background noise study and establish what the natural sound environment is like, and then look at what the industry is likely to do to that sound or how it may alter it.
And tell me, could you give me an idea to date, where is the most tranquil place?
Well, there was a study commissioned by the EPA some time back in 2003. It was called the Noise in Quiet Areas report, if you like, and they found that the lowest level at that time was Clonmacnoise, and they measured levels down to as low as 19 to 20 dB. So that's a sort of benchmark, but we're hoping that there are locations out there that might be even quieter still.
Now, if you are interested in what we're talking about, download. The form is there now on the website. I've just been told, and I've just checked it is there. So rte.ie/mini. Download the form and then go out and carry out your own mini survey. Now, try go with somebody. Take all necessary precautions and all of that kind of stuff. We don't want you having an accident, so be careful. You do it at your own risk. just to say that at the outset. But then fill in the form and then send it back to the Mooney Show at Most Tranquil Place in Ireland, RTE Radio 1 in Dublin 4, and then we'll pass them on and we'll go through them, then we'll see what happens next. But I think this would be an interesting little experiment to see if we can find Ireland's most tranquil place. Now, it has been done in the UK and it's been done in other places. There's a gentleman by the name of, I think it's Trevor Fox. Are you familiar with, isn't that his name?
Trevor Cox, yes.
Trevor Cox, excuse me, yeah.
That's right. I am familiar with Trevor. Yes, and they used they carried out a whole series of social surveys, and they came up with the Tranquility Index. But I think we'll be able to do it from the questionnaires that we've prepared.
All right, very good indeed. So listen, thank you very much indeed, Dermot Keeney from ICANN Acoustics in our Galway studio. He is our acoustic expert in this little experiment we're carrying out. So do get onto the website now, rte.ie.